Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! And video game news. Today is May 1st, Monday. So let's see, regarding ranked duels, we have been reset since the month has started. And then there is a survey here for the Attribute 4, which I would say that was a definitely bad experience. I assume it's over now. Nope, it's 7 more hours. So theoretically, I guess if I could win 5 more victories, I'd get a whopping 10 gems. Meanwhile, we have probably some daily quests that I didn't finish over the weekend because I didn't play any over the weekend, and then just your standard login and Duel Live. And every month, I guess we can say we hope to log in every single day for the 20 gems that gets you, but it doesn't happen every single day. It's not likely to. So yeah, I had two options over the weekend as far as playing video games. One would have been to pour through this and try and get more victories. To get 200 gems, I guess if I could get 2 victories right now, that would be the big bonus. And then if we could get all the way up to 1100 in the next couple hours, which is almost certainly not going to happen, we could get 300 gems. And then it would just be any extra gravy that's just not even really worth trying for as far as legacy packs and titles. But you can see I barely got to this point where this Moai Interceptor head would have unlocked, and I'm not sure if you could have gotten that any other way. Like, eventually Yu-Gi-Oh! Is gonna have to start giving away these things or selling these things on top of things, or you're gonna 5 years down the road have them give away the exact same accessory, because in part some of these accessory things are just not worth constantly creating more content when you're going to have minimal people buying it. Inherently, a big problem with a lot of these gacha games, and that's more than likely why you see so many Yu-Gi-Oh! Games existing at the moment, and so many just like gacha games in general, is that they are chasing after the super whales that are spending hundreds, if not thousands, of dollars in microtransactions every month, and that is just doing 90% or more of the funding of a game. And as soon as a whale gets, or a super whale gets tired of playing that game, like, you only need one of them. But once that super whale goes away, then they just shut down the game completely. And I wouldn't be surprised if for Yu-Gi-Oh! They do it a little bit slower, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's exactly what happens. Okay. I have no idea what this deck is. Destroy all monsters your opponent controls. Let's start with that. Then we'll try and activate this. And then we'll toss this and banish it. And let's see. I don't even know what this deck is. I don't feel like I've ever even played this. Fire, earth, wind, all. Yeah, I'm color me confused here. So we'd want something with Charmer in the name. I almost certainly have played this deck and just don't remember anything about it and didn't learn anything about it during this whole process. So for the accountability section here, it's going to be fairly simplistic. I, over the weekend, was playing Metroid Dread, and I'll talk about that in more detail in a second. I played for like 3 or 4 hours. Why am I going to delay it? Let's just talk about Metroid Dread now. That makes more sense instead of saying teasing it and talking about something else. I played for like 3 or 4 hours because on normal mode in Metroid Dread, and then I hit one of the major bosses. Now major bosses, as now I am at the almost exact end of the game, is kind of a questionable phrase to use. And because there is definitely like a multiple scale that's happening here, where so I guess if I put a flip summons thing, what can I do to activate this trap? There are robots in the game that are right on the cover. The main thing is focused on all the robots as being bosses, and those are like special bosses that frankly don't feel like Metroid at all and feel like they should have been in some kind of horror game. Wait, that card is different than this card, so I should have put this card down. So yeah, there's these almost completely immortal robots that honestly are more of a puzzle aspect, I would say, than a than they are an actual boss fight. There is a boss fight that you have to do that frankly gets repeated 7 times to then get the power to power up to defeat the almost immortal robots. But that's not the boss that was really giving me trouble, because honestly those patterns in this game, Metroid Dread, is very much a pattern based game, and that is one of its major flaws. I guess I'm just bearing the lead here, and I should just say it, put it out there. I don't like Metroid Dread. I don't think it's a good Metroid game. Now, arguably, I am the wrong person to ask what a good Metroid game is, as somebody who very possibly never beat Metroid 1 or Super Metroid. I probably didn't even really play Super Metroid. I've played a lot of Metroidvania, Castlevania type games, certainly, but often I feel like in retrospect I may have been too critical of Castlevania, Metroidvania games in being difficult, if Metroid Dread is the new standard on super difficult. And that does seem in line with what other people are complaining about. And so when I started Metroid Dread without an internet connection and didn't get the update to the rookie mode, that created a situation where I really wasted 4 hours and got to that first boss and just could not win. Part of the problem is some basic things that seem fairly obvious, Yes, the original Metroid games were missing a lot of quality of life enhancements because they were old games, but it does not make any sense just for nostalgia's sake to uh, not give a life bar on the bosses. Had you been told that you were getting much closer towards winning by seeing a life bar at the top of the bosses, that would have been a great feature. And since the Metroid series really does seem like it's just Samus Aran constantly evolving anyways, it does make a lot of sense to just give her a new ability. Plus, you kind of need her to get new abilities to counter the fact that half of every Metroid game is just her starting with the same old abilities anyways. Like, and like, it is fairly ridiculous that every single game you lose your wave beam, your morph ball mode, your super bombs, your super missiles, things like that. And there is some tradition to that, but also you should probably get some new abilities to counter that. And you get a little bit in Metroid Dread, but I wouldn't say a lot. Like, in a lot of ways, two of the abilities specifically against the robots are teased like you're never going to get that permanently, so it's only going to be in this game. They make it very obvious that that's the case. But yeah, I'm trying to think if there is actually any ability in Metroid Dread that's even new that would end up following to another Metroid game. I can say storyline wise, there's probably not a lot that would need to. Well, I like that deck. It was strange that I've never played it before, or don't remember playing it before, but whatever. Yep. It maybe does one like slight surprise reveal right at the ending, but otherwise, like all Metroid games, there's basically no story except for that one Metroid game that everybody hated, where they gave way too much characterization and story to Samus Aran, and then made her come off, at least in the English version, as incredibly passive and obedient, way less of a badass bounty hunter than you would think. And that is part of the problem with Samus Aran in general, is that she is much more of a blank slate that you can just imprint anything upon, even more than, say, Mario, who has had, well, way more than Mario, because Mario's been fully fleshed out multiple times. But yeah, it probably is true that Metroid games generally had rooms that once you got powerful enough, you would just run through them, and you would have this pattern in which you would go through 2 or 3 medium to large size rooms, and then you would be on a mini boss area, and then you might even hit after that 2 or 3 more rooms, and then you'd be on a medium sized boss, and then 2 or 3 more rooms, and you'd be on a large sized boss. Here it feels like that scale is a little bit smaller than even that, where you're going 2 rooms and then fairly consistently having another boss fight, which for the most part devalues a lot of the room. There is some things I think worth spoiling, in that 100% of the map being cleared does not seem to do anything for you. So it is a little misleading that every square that you walk over in the mini-map, it reveals itself. So you can have very nice clean rooms where you're jumping around, touching every square in the mini-map to reveal itself, but that doesn't do anything for you. Other than give you a nice clean map. Inherently, it is exactly against what you should be doing, and which is racing through it, because you get different end gallery pictures if you beat the game on different difficulties under 8 hours and under 4 hours, which is in line with the real Metroid fans, of which I don't count myself, that have just gotten really good at Metroid and Super Metroid and played it over and over again and could just speedrun it. I think probably in comparison, Metroid Dread is a much bigger map. One of the speed boost abilities you get late in the game is, I find that very difficult to activate, and there's several collectibles worth that you have to activate the speed boost to get to, and they become difficult parkouring type maneuvers that the general game just does not encourage you to try and get good at that stuff, because the parkouring and speedrunning ability has nothing to do with the boss fighting, and I would say 2/3 of the game you are boss fighting. In fact, the boss fighting has very little to do with the rest of Metroid at all. In almost every boss fight, your goal, whether they don't tell you this, but your goal is just to pour as many missiles into it as possible, except for the final boss fight, in which the guy is actually at times invulnerable, so then you have to find a different way potentially to counter him with these counterattacks so that he becomes no longer invulnerable, so you can attack him. And that's literally, in the final boss fight, the only way to move from like one phase to the next, is you've got to have the Y button counter, which they love the Y button counter as a concept, but it totally is not in line with the rest of the Metroid series, and it completely, at least in the final boss fight and a lot of the previous encounters, changes how you fight in Metroid and completely changes the game. And that's what I think the core of this is that Mercury Stream collaborated, I think in a lot of ways kind of begged Nintendo, because they were rejected a couple of times, to make a Metroid game, and then they didn't really make a Metroid game, because Dread's really not a Metroid game. In no point have you had a horror aspect where you have to run away from the enemies until you can get a special gun to defeat them, a one-use gun to defeat these invulnerable enemies. That's just never really been the case. Samus Aran has never run away, in my mind, before. And definitely, while there's some kind of gory visuals, maybe in some of the previous Metroid games, it never felt like it was supposed to be really scary. So that feels like that's going in a different direction. But also, I just think in general there's a lot of fighting and slightly not enough item finding. There is no rewards whatsoever for finding items after a certain point, because the game is incredibly unbalanced. Boss fights are way too difficult, even on rookie mode, and you will be 3 or 4 hours into gameplay on your first playthrough before you get to the first major boss fight that will kick your butt. And that's exactly what happened to me, And even when I was playing on rookie mode, that first major boss fight was still kicking my butt. So, like, it was not a fun experience. It's just like, over the weekend, and yes, this has been a relatively short amount of time, and I should file a complaint on that too. Nintendo games now have gotten just incredibly short. Weekend plays type stuff. I would say Mario Odyssey does a pretty good job of giving you 2 or 3 weekends worth of play if you play it very thoroughly, and if you're going to try and get like all the moons. There was a much smaller percentage of like moons in Mario Odyssey that were too difficult for me to bother to get, whereas I would say there's about 12% of all the collectibles in Metroid Dread that are around the speedrunning puzzles and platforming, parkouring puzzles that are just not worth getting. And the only reward you really are going to get that matters is energy tanks, which give you more life. And because the game is incredibly balanced, if you get hit by some of the major bosses, they're taking out 75, 100 units of life anyways. So almost a full energy tank. And yes, it is, to me, as somebody who's not good at Metroid, obviously, and arguably is just getting worse at these older games anyways, it's ridiculous that they also, on top of adding the rookie mode, added a one-hit or nearly one-hit mode to the game, as far as like a hardcore mode, and that seems ridiculous. But once you have, I would say, somewhere around 120 missiles, which you're almost certainly going to find that even if you're just speedrunning the game, you at that point have enough missiles to beat even the final boss, because even the final boss is going to have you do the dodge counter maneuver, and when you're doing the dodge counter maneuver, it refills your health and your missiles quite a bit. So if you go into the final boss fight with 150 missiles, or if you go into the boss fight with a 250 missiles, there's literally no difference, because you will shoot that many missiles. You only shoot about 50 at most into the enemy before you have to do a counter, and at that point it would just fill up another 50. Getting more health will certainly help you. It lets you screw up one more time when trying to do the counter maneuvers and try and figure out the patterns, which is somewhat helpful there. But inherently, what it comes down to is you'll learn the patterns of the first phase of the final boss fight quite a bit, and then you'll just get into the second phase where all the patterns change and you don't get a checkpoint there. So if you die in the second phase, you have to go back to the first phase. And guess what? There's a third phase and a fourth phase, and there's no reason to have any faith that in the third phase or fourth phase that there would be any difference at all on that it would like checkpoint you somewhere at the beginning of the third phase. It'd be nice if it did that. And again, if you had a health bar, I would have a lot more confidence that I've gotten further in the second phase, and then if there was a checkpoint at the beginning of the third phase, that would be great. But I don't have a lot of faith that any of that's going to happen. And so several times I've gotten into these boss fights where I'm just hurting my hand because I'm smashing the firing button so much and jumping and dashing so much. Which, yeah, there is this flash dash ability that maybe that is new for Metroid, but also I think that's probably a mistake, because it's really far from what Metroid was. Inherently, what Metroid was a kind of precision. You would jump up to shoot a missile on a middle horizon, or you would crouch down to shoot on the lower horizon, or you'd just shoot on your normal horizon, and maybe you would double jump and get on another horizon. So it was very much, you had 4 or 5 lanes of verticality to shoot missiles in that direction. And with Metroid Dread, it locks you in place, and you can lock yourself in place and shoot at angles, which totally changes how the game works quite a bit. And once you're no longer locked into those horizons, you start to make a... Let's just activate a spell for no reason. You start to make a very different game where it's much more modern. In the sense that you're running around, dashing, jumping over enemies, jumping backwards. And that is something I can't really complain about too much, because in all fairness, that is exactly what should happen. Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense for you to stick to what the original Metroid game was like, with more of a stiff vertical and horizontal ways of firing and jumping. But I think locking into place and shooting at angles probably is a mistake, instead of it just perhaps auto-targeting and auto-locking, which that would have helped this game quite a bit, frankly. Even if it was just in boss fights, and even if you just got it halfway through the game, the one feature that could have helped would have been an auto-lock. There are definitely a lot of fights where people are jumping around and you're having to jump around to avoid their shots, and they're jumping around to avoid your shots, and so it does just become this circus event more than an actual fight, compared to some of the original Metroid things where you would just like have an enemy across the screen, you would know his weak spot, and you would jump and hit that weak spot, and then you would dodge their attacks. But inherently, because so much of Dread is around the counter maneuver, it gets away from a regular Metroid game. For that reason, there is a midpoint in the game, and I don't want to spoil too much here, but it kind of sucks, because in the midpoint of the game, it changes nothing, and yet story-wise it changes everything. It changes nothing because you're basically fighting just stronger versions of the enemies you've been fighting from before the midpoint of the game, and changes the visuals on how you collect energy and weapons after killing somebody, and it kind of just speeds up the game. And I feel like they probably in playtesting realized that if they didn't do something around the halfway point, you would end up dodge countering some of the lowest of the easy monsters far too often just to get more resources. And storyline wise, it changes, I think, quite a lot, but yeah, it has this weird storyline feeling where you're kind of lowering the diversity of the different kinds of characters on the field in the game, and you're just fighting one kind of enemy over and over again that just takes a bunch of different forms, which that's perhaps too much of a spoiler. Let's not activate that. Ooh. What kind of special summon there? Apparently nothing. He's just decided to surrender, I think. Clock's not ticking down. But yeah, Metroid Dread generally needs a much more a much easier mode than even rookie mode, and I would say it probably needs a lot more I think it just needs a lot more rooms that have something slightly different and interesting to do in them. We can see Dixby's on the chat saying hello. Hello, Dixby. Of course, I definitely am coming from more of the Metroid Prime aspect, and I think Metroid Prime, taking it 3D, having these big arena levels that had a lot of places to scan, I was very disappointed to find that there is no scanner in Metroid Dread. And yeah, so, but yeah, I am just generally coming from the idea that while I honor from a distance the original Metroid and Super Metroid games, my fandom definitely is more from the Metroid Prime aspects. And so I would be much more hyped potentially to go back and play the Metroid Prime remakes, and work my way towards the Metroid Prime 4 if that ever gets released. I'm glad Mercury Stream doesn't seem to be working on that. And I looked up Mercury Stream, and yeah, they worked on like one other Metroid game, and that's about it worth mentioning. They did release a long time ago a American McGee game called like Carnage or something. No, it wasn't called Carnage. It was called some C word, which I didn't even know there was other games that started American McGee colon something other than Alice series. And they've released that like remastered version of that game. But otherwise it seems like Mercury Stream really hasn't done too much. I definitely would be less critical of Metroid Dread if it had just been called Dread and it had been a Metroidvania inspired. Even at that though, I don't know if I would have sung its praises too much as a game, because as a Metroidvania I don't think it really works that well. I think if you had eliminated the Metroidvania aspects of Metroid Dread and just had a horror game with counter attacks as the only way to escape and run away, then you would have had a thematically more consistent experience. But the robots that are on the cover of Metroid Dread honestly barely make any sense at all to be in the game. It doesn't make any logical sense as to how they are being controlled, or why they would have been included in the game in the first place. Spellcaster with 1500 defense. I don't think I'm gonna have that. The only thing I guess I can say particularly positively around Metroid Dread, and it's not an awful game. I know I'm being a critic here and only pointing out the negative, but it does feel like a very large map-wise Metroidvania game compared to some of the ones I've played on PC where the maps seem to be very small and very linear. I would say you have an opportunity to jump around multiple places and come in and out of multiple locations in Metroid Dread very nicely. Unfortunately, it's on the Switch, so there's just a ridiculous amount of loading. Yeah, it's not a very optimized game at all. There's a lot of loading, a lot of watching Samus Aran sitting in an elevator, watching her go up and down elevators. And on top of that, they don't even tell you this, but once you've found a certain number of different colored teleporters, or one of each color teleporters, you then can interconnect the teleporters. And so a red teleporter doesn't just by default go to a red teleporter, it goes to any teleporter, which is great and all, but you unlock that when you're at the end of the game. So it's only helpful if you wanted to it really is only helpful if you wanted to collect 100% of all the collectibles. And the only reason you'd want to collect all 100% of the collectibles is to get more health. Again, because that's the only thing that's really going to help you in the final beat the boss, the final boss. So yeah. Equip which monster from extra stack? I guess we'll go with the biggest one. And then what? We could tribute one fire monster and do that much damage. I'm not going to attack here. Yep. So yeah, I don't know if I have anything more to really say about Metroid Dread. I'm glad Metroid Prime 4 is being made by a different company. I'm not glad Metroid Prime 4 has been forever in development hell. I hope... You always hope when one of these games is taking forever to be developed that they are doing it right and maybe restarting 2 or 3 times to really get a good game out there. They would live up to the Metroid Prime narrative. I'm going to activate this now because we'll see what happens here. See, them activating that spell probably wouldn't have done anything anyways. But whatever. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much all you can do is hope for Metroid Prime 4. I don't think at this point I would recommend Metroid Dread to people. Unless you've played Metroid 1, Super Metroid, things like that, and those... And you're really good at that, and you followed down the route of playing more of the Game Boy Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy DX Metroid games. All those games that, in my mind, were the portable games that really didn't matter. And inherently, that was often the case for most game series, is that if there was a Game Boy or a portable version of a game from Nintendo, it didn't matter. But in the Metroid series, because Nintendo never cared about Samus Aran as a character, or the Metroid series, because it doesn't sell in Japan at all, they they always made that series continue on the portable side. Yeah, I don't know if that was worth doing there. Although, I don't know if anything I'm doing here is going to work. Let's see. Do this. Then special summon this. Then activate this. See, each one of these equipment monsters, I guess, does something. Okay. I don't know if any of these actually matter. So yeah, had I summoned this first, so now I've destroyed a tune card, but the tune card's already out there. So I don't know if that's gonna help. So I'm definitely doing a lot of things, but I don't think the things I'm doing matter enough. Yeah. So unless there's some special thing here where it can't attack. Yeah, I destroyed his Toon World, but that keeps this on the field. Yeah, I really am, in general, just kind of wasting my time playing Nintendo games and wasting my Nintendo Switch, and that I just don't have enough time to play enough Nintendo games. It is a small list of Nintendo games that I would want to play going forward. Just so it's very hard to justify paying $200 for a Switch, even though I've already done it, when I played just Mario Odyssey and now Metroid Dread and Pokemon Snap and then New Super Mario Bros. U. I didn't even like Breath of the Wild. I only got halfway through and didn't really like. Nintendo games probably are just beyond me at this point. Like, as a PC gamer, as more of an adult, I'm not going to play Splatoon, although I would like to run through the single player on that. But and I'm not going to get a bunch of eShop things or anything like that, so Let's see, are we continuing down this path? Yeah, I think we are. Just keep on playing this deck, just for fun, more than anything. If we can get a few more crystals and a few more gems, that would be great, but... It was otherwise a kind of weird weekend to continue this accountability section. I finally got someone with a ladder to put up the Christmas lights I bought after Christmas that are smart Christmas lights. I spent half the weekend fighting with my Wi-Fi again, and I honestly think it is literally just my ISP does something that has figured out some way to also screw up my Wi-Fi connection, which there really should be a major separation there where my Wi-Fi router would work and not just start rebooting, which is what it's doing, regardless of what nonsense signals it's potentially getting. And so I have really developed this whole new process in which it'll start rebooting, and then I'll just unplug the cable modem or fiber modem in this case, and then it will stop rebooting long enough for me to at least try and change some settings. In further investigation, found that some of the interference that I thought I was getting, the interference protection protocols, actually seem to make it worse. So I turned those off again, and we'll see how that goes. Inherently, that with the DDWRT advanced settings, you shouldn't really ever touch the advanced settings at all. But the thing that I think happens is everybody creates these new standards and these new ideas that sound amazing as far as making Wi-Fi work faster, better, more stable, and they're just bad programmers. Like, as far as the idea is implementation, and there probably is just not that much competition, I would say, in general. So what is this? A earth creature? Okay. So yeah, it seems like almost every feature is better if you don't enable it, or every little making big changes. But yeah, if anything, that wasn't as bad as it could have been this weekend, but I am, like every weekend now, messing with my Wi-Fi, and it's not particularly helping the situation with the smart bulbs and them inconsistently working, which I think some of that is just straight the bulbs fault. One thing it does seem like is going to be an issue is that the idea of a thread compatible smart device, is arguably not how a lot of these devices are going to be sold. Like, because technically Thread is somewhat under the Wi-Fi standard, it's an 802.11.4 or something like that as far as the standard. I think a lot of people are going to be selling their devices as just Wi-Fi smart devices, even though technically they should be using the Thread branding, just because Thread is too new. And I see a lot of devices that say they're Bluetooth Wi-Fi devices, and there's just no easy way in the advertisement when you're buying these cheap Chinese products on Amazon or even Alibaba, if you're going to go that route, there's just no way to know if that is a Bluetooth low energy, Bluetooth mesh, or if it's just using Bluetooth to set up the process, and then it's going through 802.11b, g, or n 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi, which these are all just numbers that I'm sure go over the head of most people. But there's just like too many competing standards, and the upper layer of matter to interconnect a bunch of different interfaces will only help so far. Matter is going to effectively get apps like HomeKit and Smart Life and Smart Things and Google Home. All of those apps will start communicating with each other and sharing things, but at the core you may still need all of those apps installed, at least for the initial setup, and they still are going to be communicating through either Zigbee, Z-Wave, Bluetooth of some sort, or Thread. And Thread is the only standard right now that even begins to make any sense at all. And I could easily see even Thread being replaced by a better standard. So yeah, messed with my Wi-Fi, got someone to help, someone with a ladder to put up my Christmas lights. My Christmas lights now look way better. They were just hanging basically on a few rafters, basically, or awnings. In a few places. That was as much as I could do, as I could stand on the ground and just try and throw it over a place where it might hang. But now it looks very pretty. Now I will say the Christmas light bulbs that I'm using outside, while they are weatherproof, are not really designed to be on Christmas bulb clips. They're incredibly thin and light, and there's like one side that's an LED and one side that's kind of the back side of the LED. So there's kind of a good side and a bad side. I don't think it really matters once you're in the middle of the night. I think it looks perfectly the same either way, but the only way I could imagine that you really would have done it with the strand lights that I used would have probably been to glue the entirety of the lights down to the awnings, to the roof, instead of using clips, which arguably that is that's not how you would want to do it with these. What you would have wanted to do instead is just have the more taped backed LEDs. But the problem with getting like a roll of tape backed LEDs is then you would want to put it in an aluminum channel for cooling purposes, and then you'd want to put a diffuser on it, and it's just going to really increase the price of everything in installing it, and inherently it's still not going to look amazingly good because you're going to end up wanting to have too many LEDs per strip that would just create major problems as far as cooling. No, not cooling, as far as powering it, which, yeah, that is the secret, I think, that they don't really tell you about as far as LEDs, is that they feel like they'd be low power, but they're not. They're low voltage, but they take quite a bit of current, and so if you get something that has 60 LEDs per strand, it probably is the most you can do for like a meter long strand or 3 meter long strand. If you start getting anything above that, like 120, you're going to just need massive amounts of current providing, and you're going to need to run a lot of extra power infusers to get the power to go up. So there really isn't any solution other than when building a new house, there probably should be some wiring holes around your roof, and you should just build the house with the idea that there would be LEDs on it at the beginning, if not starting that way. And that's a weird thing to be thinking about while building a house, but yeah. More power outlets in general make a lot of sense. Anyways. And more wired things make a lot more sense when building a house. Like, go wired cameras, do not go wireless cameras, because once you start getting a whole bunch of wireless cameras, you're going to find that you don't have enough airtime spectrum for it, and they're going to interfere with each other. Of course, it's so far there's no standard or no way to have non-wireless smart light bulbs. Let's see. The best you could probably do at the moment would be to just get Bluetooth mesh if you can't get thread. Alright, but I'm talking too much about smart home nonsense. And yeah, then I also got distracted yesterday right in the middle of playing a video game in which, out of the blue, somebody wanted to meet with me and have a dinner. You know, that was fine and all, but there was not as much advance notice as I would have liked on that. And partially, definitely, it was a frustrating experience. That's 100% my fault, in that I just have not driven around where I live enough, and so there is a kind of incredibly small paths and directions that I've gone and know where to drive, and so if I need to go somewhere new, I need to take a lot more time to map it out and figure it out, and I'm still trying to get Google Maps to work on my phone the way I'd like it to work. And Google Maps is only going to be so helpful as far as telling you where you want to go. If you want to go a different route, it's almost impossible to set that up, when it really should be a very smooth experience where it knows that I want to go this way, and I don't want to go other ways, mostly avoiding highways and avoiding even busy roads. I just don't like driving in general in really congested, busy places, if I can avoid it. But yeah, it was a very frustrating meal in general, just because it was incredibly noisy and incredibly expensive. This is a thing I've noticed on restaurants too, is that twice now I've gone into restaurants that are not very high quality, and they have actively, intentionally removed the dollar signs from their menus and removed the zero at the end. So it will say something like 17.5, and you've got to try to mentally figure out that's $17.50 that they're asking for. And yeah, I ordered like a plate of nachos for $17.15, and what was delivered to me, which honestly, if I had more of a spine, I really should have just sent it back and said, no, I'm not paying for this. This is way too small of a portion. But they brought me what were 6 tortilla chips halves. So if you had a round circle of a tortilla chip that was pretty big, they cut that in half, and they brought me 6 of those with a little bit of beans, a little bit of cheese, and fajita meat on it for $17.50, and then even for their plate, it was half empty because you could definitely they filled the rest of the plate with just lettuce. So yeah, just the total ripoff. Food prices in general are just going up and up and up, but it is getting really, really ridiculous as far as the quality also going down, on top of also running into a couple places that straight up charging extra if you don't pay with cash. And this is probably a complaint a lot of other people have already seen and recognized, and just recently in this new medium emergency that I'm living with, I'm out and about a lot more. Honestly, the best way to save money has always been to be living on a farm somewhere in the middle of nowhere and just not engaging with having to go places or eat at restaurants. Well, that was the last of his cards he could play. I'm in a funny position as far as video game news, since I guess maybe because it was just the end of April and there's just nothing going on. I guess because of that, there was not a lot of video game news that happened over the weekend. Plus, it is worth pointing out that the Twitter seems to be broken at this point, so I was logged out of Twitter, and I checked other people saying that they were also logged out, and I briefly was able to log back in, and then it logged me out again. So any extra news that may have been happening around that, I also don't have that information. See, so I would need basically 2 more victories here, and then 2 more victories to get to here. So if we can get like 4 victories in the rest of today, that'd be fine. And potentially that is going to be fairly fun because as far as Video Games Chronicle articles, we have a story we'd already covered where F123 is seemingly teased the return of the Breaking Point story mode, which, okay, if you know what that is, that's probably exciting. If you don't, then you probably are not the target audience of F123. The Mario movie will reportedly cross 1 billion in box office this weekend, which the weekend's over, so it probably did cross 1 billion. I listened to another YouTuber talk about the Mario movie, and they're more of a critical, always more negative type reviewer, and yeah, they said that there isn't a lot of substance to the Mario movie, which seems to be the case because nobody's really talking plot points or characterization or anything, but the people are saying, yeah, it's good enough for kids, and that's basically all it needed to do. Like, yeah, all they really had to do is not make an awful garbage movie that would have been memed on and made fun of, or honestly, if they had made too good of a movie, that might have caused a problem later on down the road too, had this been the best movie ever. then you potentially would create a scenario where the sequel would have to struggle to compete with that. Okay. $2,000 by sending these two to the graveyard. Then we just pick this guy, I guess, again. And then don't think I can do anything more. They have created, I suppose, a precedent now as far as what the Mario movie will be. And so there is this danger now if they try to bring back, say, Jack Black as Bowser, or any of the other famous stunt casted actors. Those actors will almost certainly want more pay unless they're already under like a 3-movie deal contract or something at a certain pay. So you're going to now be down this path where if they do try to make a Mario movie sequel, or try to make a lot of sequels, they're eventually going to just have to pay more and more and more to have the same stunt casted people play the voices when the voices aren't even that good. And you could slowly say, let's get rid of like Princess Peach for somebody cheaper, or let's get rid of Toad for somebody cheaper. Or you could try to make some argument as to why all the voices would sound different. I don't know if that's really going to work too well. And recast everybody. Go ahead and flip. Generally, I don't think I want to see a Mario movie series happen. A sequel would be fine, but even the Pokemon movies feel like with the new Pokemon TV anime series, they should make a really big special event when they're going to make a Pokemon movie based off of the new anime series characters, and not try to put out 2 or 3 every year, which at some point it did feel like they were getting kind of crazy down that path. And having at least one movie. I wouldn't be surprised if movie theaters do become more of the venue for kids. But at a certain point also movie theaters probably need to be a lot cheaper. And everything just needs to be a lot cheaper. Otherwise you're going to have a lot of kids just sitting at home playing video games or twiddling their thumbs. So what can we summon? 29. So then we should equip this, and then this should give it 1,000. Okay. So then you hit this. And then you hit this. Let's see. Next Video Games Chronicle article. Here, sorry, I'm going a little quiet here. I'm actually paying attention to playing Yu-Gi-Oh! At this point. Respawn has apologized for the state of Star Wars Jedi Survivor on PC. The game currently has a mixed review sentiment on Steam based on just under 10,000 reviews. Do they have an actual link to it on Steam? Because that would be helpful. Yeah, at a certain point though, it kind of just doesn't matter how much you apologize. Like you released the game in this state, and you should have known that it was going to be released in this state, and so you are just hoping that an apology will suffice instead of having done the right thing in the first place. I mean, there really is an argument here that this 2023 is the year of bad broken game releases. And so yeah, if we look on Steam here as far as Star Wars Jedi Survivor, it is at a 54% positive with 13,336 reviews as of right now. And this does definitely create a weird situation where if you were going to play the first game, then you potentially just stop at the first game right now, at least until I'm gonna go and summon this and tribute this just for fun. Does that change this here? So, yeah. Definitely puts you in a weird position as far as just like, what would you want to do as far as playing the, as far as playing this Star Wars Jedi Survivor series. And what kind of sucks here, if you were to compare this to The Force Unleashed, because The Force Unleashed 2 was, storyline-wise, I think, a much worse game. I don't think that there's much of a argument there. But Jedi Survivor, potentially, I haven't heard anybody getting far enough in the game to say whether the story is good or not. So theoretically, 6 months down the road, 2 years down the road, whenever I would personally get around to playing Jedi Survivor, it might just be this great experience that nobody ever had, because all the day one adopters, which, if ever, this is just another example of people in video games, video gamers being told and shown that they shouldn't be day one adopters for video games, and that you really should wait outside that 6 weeks to 6 months launch period to buy any game. And screw game developers who say that if you don't buy it day one or pre-order it, you won't get a sequel. Why do we even want sequels at this point if you're going to get a sequel like Jedi Survivor that is just buggy and rushed to cash in? Inherently, you have to do what's good for yourself first and not try to be a white knight to prop up a bad business plan of the gaming industry by pre-ordering or buying on day one games or buying during the launch window. Game sales probably would be better if they did also fall. If it became much more normal that 100,000 sales was a good amount of sales. It's going to happen anyways as we get more and more game developers and more options. The numbers just cannot go up and up and up unless we just have more and more humans on the planet, which causes a whole bunch of other problems. So, yeah. You inherently have to lower your expectations as a company. Once you've sold all the nails to every roofer or handyman in the world, you can't expect to sell more nails. And video games don't want to. Video game companies don't want to believe that. Should be. Yeah, I don't know which one to do here. Guess you do this one. And then just end. Let's see, Respawn's boss says he would love to see a Titanfall 3, but the Apex Legends studio is not working on anything currently, which, if anything, that is a damnation as a quote to say you're not working on anything at all currently. How can you even be in business if you're not working on anything? Are you just maintaining Apex Legends? That should then say anything new. And I imagine this is barely news because I feel like Respawn's boss has said this before, and at a certain level, there definitely seems like in that studio there's a lot of life and love for Titanfall, and that they'd like a Titanfall 3 to potentially fix some of the problems of Titanfall 2. But I think Ubisoft or EA or one of those big companies owns the rights to Titanfall, and I don't think they're going to do anything with it because I don't think Titanfall 2 sold well enough for them. So in a lot of ways, this is not news, and this is really more of a case of the Respawn boss trying to make something happen. And if anything, I guess I can say at least Respawn's boss is not as blatant and pathetic, for lack of a better term, than, say, American McGee, who spent years getting people to Kickstarter his attempts to make an American McGee's Alice Madness Return sequel, and then only for that to really just fail miserably and then give up. Water, Earth. I mean, Earth is what you'd want. We have someone on the chat called Dev asking how far in Master Duel. I mean, I'm playing the Attribute 4 event, and I'm arguably not that far. Trying to get just to kind of the halfway point, if anything. Trying to get summoning gems. Well, it seems like I'm going in circles here, but maybe in the long run, this will do something. Doesn't seem like it's going to do too much at the moment, though. Can't attack. Let's see. And this is why we can't have nice things as far as Video Games Chronicle articles here. Jedi Survivor was the UK's second biggest box launch of the year. So regardless of the fact that it was completely buggy on PC, people are still willing to buy it in stores. Now maybe the most of the people are buying it on like consoles, and in fairness, I do think that the console versions of Jedi Survivor seem to have been done a lot better than the PC port. So maybe they just poured all of their attention in having the console versions very good, but then why not just delay the PC version and avoid the controversy? It doesn't help them. Dev is asking what decks have I made. I made this deck, which was basically just copying the Gem Knight deck. Let me rephrase that. I did not make a deck at all. This is the Gem Knight deck, which was the only pre-made deck that would even possibly fit within the event rules. And so otherwise I've been playing, I think, with this one for a long time, but this one all of a sudden seems to be working a lot more, so that's what I've been playing with for today. Just trying to get, I guess, 3 more victories here to get to the 300 gem. Anything else as far as legacy packs would be nice, but then legacy packs aren't that valuable, and the title does not mean anything to me. Plus, it is not realistic that in the next few hours I'm going to win that much. Not unless I just got on some kind of major server bug where it just disconnected the other opponent and gave me a victory for that over and over and over again. And even if you got a good 8 hours of something like that happening, there's only so much you could do with that. You could, I suppose, play ranked and get all the way up to the highest diamond level, which would be interesting to use network troubles to your advantage. And certainly you could get all of the rewards for whatever current event is happening. But that's about as far as you could go. Just keep on playing ranked and getting victories to get small bits of rewards. But even if you are the absolute best player of Master Duel and were winning non-stop as fast as humanly possible, the system is fairly limited. So you couldn't, in 8 hours of just getting a victory every few seconds, get all the cards in the entire game. And even if you did something like that, and this is the problem with effectively cheating anyways, is that you just ruin the experience for yourself, because then you would have all the cards and no motivation to earn any more. Let's see. Video Games Chronicles next article says PlayStation Studios boss insists that upcoming live service games will target diverse genres and scales. Herman Holst says targeting different genres, schedules, and scales. Which, okay, that seems like a smart move, particularly on PlayStation, although the live service part is certainly the speed bump here. PlayStation should just have games that are more diverse in its genres, since almost all the PlayStation games tend to target Japanese players who are mostly interested in playing JRPG type games, and so many games in general just have RPG elements as a secondary category. Dev says, could I see your decks? You don't need to see my decks, frankly, because I didn't make any difference there. You go into the attributes event yourself and see the pre-built decks. Those are the exact same ones I'm using. Go look at the pre-built deck for the Gym Knights, and that's the exact same deck that from in the store. Go look at it in the store and you'll see it there. I have not made any modification at all as far as the decks I'm playing right now. If you're asking about what deck I play when playing ranked, I have a somewhat modified Zodiac Tri-Brigade meta deck from months and months ago. It doesn't win that well, so it's not going to be that helpful. I need to find some extra time to make a new meta deck and like get some help online and make a new deck that would work better in ranked. And certainly now at the beginning of a new month, it would make some sense to do that. As far as scale, yeah, genres definitely would be good if PlayStation games, whether live service games or otherwise, were more varied in genres. As far as scale, I think, yeah, more diversity in scale. Having medium-sized games instead of giant, like 200-hour-long Final Fantasy style games would be nice, or just more variety away from the 60-hour game. Although inherently live service games in particular are going on forever anyway, so as far as scale, and which to me means length of time, is going on forever. Otherwise, if they mean by scale the amount of just like land mass, as far as is it as big as Skyrim that you're walking around a big area, in my mind, there really shouldn't be too much of a scale there as far as land mass. If you have an open world area, it needs to be pretty big and just ever growing. As far as the big open world Skyrim type games, like it should be bigger than Skyrim at minimum. As big as Witcher 3 at minimum, or it needs to be one of these games that doesn't really care about an open world and then doesn't have any of that element to it at all. Okay, so let's go ahead and get rid of this one to the graveyard and see if that works. Yeah, there are a few games where you have an open world just for kind of flavor building, and that does make sense. But trying to do something here. These are all earth things. So that. As far as schedules on live services, I think schedules in particular highlight an issue, certainly with live service games, in that Sony is recognizing even amongst its small selection of its own live service games, there is a only a certain amount of time any person is going to have to play a game. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to have special events or collaboration events or anything like that happen at the exact same time. Apparently, they are planning on having 12 live service games by the end of March 2026, 3 years. That sounds like a very large amount of games, and it does not really make sense unless you're actively saying that at most the average a super whale of live service games on PlayStation would play 3 of those. In a lot of ways, well, I'm just skimming this article, this feels very much like Herman Holst here has created a plan to keep his own division in work for a while and employed, because that is way too ambitious. And yeah, if I was the CEO of Sony Interactive Entertainment, if I was the guy in charge of PlayStation, I'd say, hey, no, we're going to have 2 or 3 live services going at a time, and they're going to have to be very different games at that point. I'm not going to buy into an idea of having 12 going at the same time just so one person can justify maintaining their division and their job. It would be a very large stretch. Like, you could potentially break it down by genders and say, hey, I'm going to have 6 live service games for girls and 6 live service games for boys by 2026. And then I'm going to break it down by year and say we're going to have 2 live service games launch every year. And at that, well, 2 for each year, 2 for boys, 2 for girls. But still, it seems like an incredibly unmanageable idea unless you're just assuming that half or more of those live services games are going to fail miserably. Like, as far as live service games I personally play, I only play the anime waifu lewd game Destiny Child, and I only play it because it's automated for the most part. And then I have a Goblins and Gnomes game that's really not so much a live service game because it's not adding any new content. And then I'm playing Marvel Snap, which is a live service game, but it's not particularly that good. And then we're playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, which I wouldn't be playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel generally if it wasn't for the YouTube channel. And I shouldn't be playing Marvel Snap, so theoretically, 1 live service game is more than enough for most people. Not 2 in a year, and then 2 the next year, and then 2 the next year. This concept is really coming from an idea that you're just expecting no loyalty, or you're expecting people on PlayStation to play a ton of video games, way more than they would. And if you push so far into these live service ideas, they're going to have to be free to play, and then you're going to lose money. Although inherently, when they talk about live service stuff, I think what they really are talking about a lot of times is just cramming in live service elements into what otherwise would not be considered a live service game. So we may very well, with this announcement, you probably are very good to just assume that every single PlayStation AAA single-player focused experience is going to have some kind of live service nonsense thrown into it, or follow down the trends that we've seen for decades of having multiplayer crammed into it, or loot box, or have extra grind added to it. Which I guess that's another complaint I could certainly make against Metroid Dread, is since Nintendo really doesn't have the infrastructure or the desire to have microtransactions or loot boxes in it, it is really, really ridiculous for Metroid Dread to be as difficult as it is. Because it's not like I could buy an extra energy tank. I don't know if Metroid Dread really has a super missile in it either. Like, it gets upgraded missiles, but it never gets to the point where it's using like 10 missiles, or there's an extra button you could press to fire 10 missiles at the same time. At most, it seems like it goes up to 3 missiles can be fired at the same time. Whereas if it did just have a super missile option, that probably would have solved a lot of the difficulty. And I think the reason there isn't a super missile option has a lot more to do with the fact that there's just not enough buttons on the controllers. And they didn't want you to have to go to a menu to swap it out. But there definitely is a feeling there that there are not enough buttons, and you're having to hold down buttons to charge things up, and buttons at the end of the game are doing sometimes 2 or 3 things, some of them. Let's see. Moving on to Video Games Chronicle news, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom has been leaked nearly 2 weeks before release. Which, okay. It definitely feels like kids are hyped around the new Zelda game, which, good for them. It definitely feels like this is going to be a generation of kids that are more about Zelda than Pokemon at this point, because the latest Pokemon game, the hype around that kind of died fairly quickly. Although, you know, who knows? They may get back into it as soon as there's a new one. I'm glad kids are liking this new Zelda, even though it's not my Zelda, and inherently that is the problem, is that I'm just this old fogey that wants something closer to Ocarina of Time, or even Wind Waker, and Breath of the Wild drastically changed what Zelda is. Metroid Dread, less drastically I would say, changed what Metroid is. So we're just getting a new generation of games with the same names. Even though they are fairly different experiences. And inherently, I guess there is this danger that several years from now we might get a Zelda game that purports to be like the old Zelda games, much like Metroid Dread was kind of selling itself as, or looks like at least, and then when you actually play it, it's still going to not quite feel nostalgic and like the old games. And yeah, it's really, really hard to fight against the nostalgia people have in their minds of old games. Let's see. Next Video Games Chronicle article we have, Microsoft is rolling out a new Xbox home screen to testers this week. Generally it looks like there's a lot of empty space here, and kind of a weirdness in that you're sort of trying to go for that Netflix interface appearance, but you're doing it weirdly in that you have things that mean different things. If anything, this looks like subcategories. So I think there's probably a mistake here. This zooms in, and I assume you would just scroll this way for all of your installed games or games that you've played, and then maybe you just don't scroll down. Choose your audio while gaming, play Hi-Fi Rush, so you've got an ad here. Find your elite, you got another ad here. So there's at least two ads here, and arguably another ad to get you into Spotify or something like that, and then browse your games. So they're trying to take up the entire bottom banner while also leaving a lot of room for background art for no real reason. And yeah, it just doesn't feel like that's the most efficient system. Plus you have these little icons, which who knows what those mean. And then you've got your gamer tag up here. And you've got clock, which arguably maybe it shouldn't have a clock if you want to keep people playing. Let's see. I guess I could watch this video on the dashboard, but honestly, I just don't care. Inherently, they probably should take some people and some of the effort that they put into remaking the dashboards over and over and over again on Xbox and put some effort into just finding a better name for their next generation console, instead of giving them these ridiculous names that has just become a continuing joke that they can't get out of, a joke with no payoff. Whereas Sony's cross-media bar design, I think, has been fairly consistent from even like PlayStation 3. I don't think too much has changed since then. And it really doesn't need to change that much. Special summon this. Activate this. And let's see. I think I want to just attack here. See what that works out to do. And then our final Video Games Chronicle article for today says Call of Duty's new DMZ event will see Activision donate up to $1 million to charity for extractions. The publisher will allocate a max of $1 million for its Call of Duty endowment charity. So literally, it seems like they are giving it to their own charity, and only if you play their game. Which, yeah, this is ridiculous. They're only willing to even give to a charity which gives them a tax write-off if you play their game, which that just does not come off as something that is from a charitable spirit, and it very much just comes off as kind of an incredibly greedy. Okay. At this point, I think what we want to do is this one. That may have been wrong. That probably was wrong. But I don't know if I could have done much better. Let's see. Loot for Good allocates $1 million to the endowment for each DMZ match where a player extracts at least $30,000 of in-game cash, up to $10 per player for the maximum of 1 million. So you immediately have to divide 1 million to 100,000 and say 100,000 players would have to play the game, and each of those 100,000 people would then have to play the game 10 times DMZ and extract 30,000 in-game cash each time, which that seems like quite a lot of gameplay to convince a very rich company to give $10. And inherently, like any of these charity drive nonsense, you're better off donating the money directly to yourself, saving yourself the time, and getting the tax write-off yourself. Although most poor people aren't really going to benefit from a charitable donation tax write-off unless you're already doing itemized deductions, and really there's some limitations as an individual on how much you could donate to charity in that case anyways. The truth of it is you're probably better off just putting the $10 back into your own pocket and handing $10 to somebody you see directly in need in front of your face. As far as what the actual endowment is, this Call of Duty endowment partners with non-profit veteran organizations in both the US and UK to deliver job placement for service people, which inherently it's worth pointing out that most charities can put a massive amount of money into administration in the sense that they're paying their board members a fee, an annual salary, which can be very, very high, and call that administration. And then, yeah, it's not uncommon to see bad charities have 95% of their income going towards the board and the administration, and very little of it actually going to people in need, really. And on top of that, you run into the scenario that a lot of charities that are bad charities will pay their board, let's say 80% of their revenue to administration, and then they will take the remaining 20% and hand it over to another charity because they don't actively actually do anything at all. And then that other charity will take of that 20% another 80% off, which would potentially leave you with like 1 or 2% of that original amount actually going to somebody needy. And they can just keep on doing it. You can just create a full loop in which money is, well, maybe not loop it in a full circle, but you can just keep on passing money from one charity to another charity to another charity, with each middleman getting a cut, which is definitely a reason why, if you want to do charity, start at home. Look at people that you actually see needy in your own face. Start with family a lot of times too. I know there's a lot more emotion built in that, but like when you control where the money goes and you can clearly see where the money is going, it's way better. And yes, a lot of times that means you're giving $10 to a homeless person on the street that may be crazy, maybe a drunk, maybe a drug addict. But guess what? Those are the people that are in need. So, and that's the only way you possibly are going to help those people. If you found a local charity that works in your specific local area and you can pay attention to where that money goes and how well they're doing it, that's often better too. Who knows? A vast number of charities are probably pretty corrupt and don't do anything as well as it should be done, but there is a difference between a local charity being corrupt and stealing $1 out of every $100 and something like the Susan B. Komen charity, which is just actively taking money to sue other people for using a pink ribbon and spread awareness of breast cancer while not actually doing anything to help anybody with breast cancer. Moving on, we have incredibly few Gematsu articles today also. And I didn't check it on Gematsu, but I did check it on GameDeveloper.com. So it does seem like this was just a very weird weekend in which nothing came out. It almost feels like there was some holiday, but I can't for the life of me think what would have been the holiday at the end of April. Maybe financial quarterly fiscal end of the year holiday. Maybe that would be the only thing. There we go. We got a quick victory. If we could get a whole bunch of those, that would be great. So yeah, we're now within reaching distance, but we still really would need 2 victories to get this 300 gems. So we want to hop back in and see if we can get another quick victory. Overall, I definitely don't like this attribute 4 deck concept. The idea is good, the implementation is poor. And I think a big part of that definitely comes down to the fact that the elemental attributes in Yu-Gi-Oh! Are an idea that was introduced at the very beginning, and they've done very little with them. And if you were to make Yu-Gi-Oh! Today, you would almost certainly not include that as an element. Guess we're gonna discard this one. And then I guess we'll set something down. I thought there was going to be some way. This is a spellcaster. But I guess not. Alright. So, of the Gematsu articles, we have Norn 9 Lost Era launches August 24th in the West. I assume this is a Young Maiden Otome visual novel. Let's see. I guess the question comes down to where is it going to be released on? Seems like maybe the Switch and iOS and Android. I guess it's just a Switch. I guess if I looked at the picture, yeah, it'd be fairly obvious it was the Switch. Dragon Quest X offline expansion, The Sleeping Hero and the Guiding Ally has first details and screenshots, if you want to check that out. And boy, can you tell a difference in animation style and the way games were advertised, as far as the old way in which things looked versus the new way that these remakes for Dragon Quest and a lot of old JRPGs look. I have no idea what these do. Let's see. Those tribute cards. It's not something I would want to do unless there was some way I could activate this without actually destroying something. But yeah, the remake visuals with these small chibi, low polygon art styles. Just, I mean, they definitely always feel like it's just a middle step and that there should just be better, more realistic 3D animation going on. Well, he surrendered or he disconnected again. We'll take that victory. That may have been a legitimate surrender. But yeah, I still just don't believe people really like this animation style, and that they are just willing to overlook the chibi low polygon animation style because this is the only thing that fits on the screen of a Switch, and this is the only thing that they're willing to animate. Inevitably, I imagine some of these other Dragon Quest games will get remade in 10 or 15 years to look much closer to this, but even better, as far as that's the way characters will always look. It does make an argument that if you were going to make a Switch 2, something like a folding screen, curved screen, not a curved screen, but like a rollout screen, it would be a cool feature, a dangerous feature certainly to put out for Nintendo Switch, but it really is the next step would be a folding screen that protected the screen when it was folded up and gave you double the height, at least, if not double the width of the screen, of what the Nintendo Switch screen is. Of course, it could just be higher resolution screen in the like 10-inch range instead of closer to a 7-inch range. I don't know how big this screen size is actually on the Switch, but I would suspect heavily that it is closer to a 7-inch screen than a 10-inch screen. And I could see it just going up to like 12 inches even. You could get ridiculously too big if you're not careful. Okay. We'll leave it at that. In all fairness, if we were to look at this, oh, that is tiny. At this resolution, the picture looks way better than blown up, where you can definitely see the pixel here. But if you were going to try and remake Dragon Quest yet again and use this animation style, you probably wouldn't have that many Japanese animators that could draw in this style that well. And you would have to redraw all of that flat 2D animation anyways. So we're probably never going back to the idea of 2D animation. And it is also important to point out that this art on the cover looked nothing like the small pixely art that would have been in the original Dragon Quest game. Moving on, Gamatsu says Loop 8 Summer of Gods, Locals trailer game designer Yuri Shibamura interview. This is another Japanese RPG game that they're advertising. Let's see what the Locals trailer looks like in this slightly blurred interface. Seems like there's music being highlighted. I still feel like these plaid school pants for this game character looks weird. I guess locals might mean that you're in the same location and that there's just different times of day. Yeah, that really is not showing us a lot there as far as the trailer. It's just here's some scenes that you'll walk around. And I guess as a JRPG game, there's going to be this romance interest and several other characters, even though they're focusing on a main protagonist character in that video. I guess there's more information to read there on Gematsu if you're interested. Inevitably, Loop 8 is one of these JRPGs that may not come to the West, or may come to the West with very little fanfare. It would be a slow process, certainly, if more Western games all got into like live services, or they were all buggy at launch to the point where more and more people would start to expand to more Eastern Japanese centric type games. Like, I think that would be a fairly slow process. It has been happening for decades, certainly, and certainly a lot of games made by Japanese companies like Super Mario Brothers are not, in my mind, what I would describe a Western focused game or an Eastern Japanese focused type game. So you have to embrace the weeaboo-ness and the Japanophile-ness a lot more as you go deeper down Japanese focused games. Moving on, a Dredge game has a post-launch updates and DLC roadmap being announced. The only problem here is I don't know what Dredge is. So let's check out what it is. Okay. Dredge is the overwhelmingly positive fishing game with some horror elements to it too, with like Cthulhu. You're fishing with these eldritch horror things. How did this not end up on my wish list? I have no idea. How did it not end up on my fall list? I don't know. This is a consistent problem, certainly, in that I feel like I'm trying to look at every single game that comes out on Steam, and obviously I need to change my programming on that to not exclude games that don't have launch dates, because I am missing big games that obviously are coming out and not having launch dates. So now that I know what Dredge is, it's telling me that there will be some paid DLC in Q4, free DLC for Q2 and Q3. Although the DLC that's free is like map markers, which can be helpful, a photo mode, which isn't going to be very helpful in actually playing the game, and a boat paint mode that's probably not going to be very helpful. So, if anything, this roadmap has just told me don't bother to buy Dredge until 2024, when all of these paid DLC is out, and probably past that point when the paid DLC would be bundled together for a cheaper price. I thought I had a good setup here, but they took it down. Yep. Let's see. BKOM Studios has announced an action RPG called Pathfinder Abomination Vaults for PC, a Kickstarter campaign to launch later in May. It's possibly pushing the limits of what should be kickstarted by whom when you have the Pathfinder people engaging in that, but that is almost a philosophy argument more than a video game critic argument. No, I think it's definitely within my venue to point that out. Now, I'm not very familiar with Pathfinder. I do know Pathfinder, I think, is kind of a Diablo game that kind of restarts and it's more of a live service experience, or the original Pathfinder is. So, if they're doing mostly what the original Pathfinder does, but then they are having it be more of an action RPG instead of a Diablo button clicker type RPG. This was possibly going to be a mistake. Yeah, let's do this. No, don't want to summon that. Can we summon this? No. Should we summon anything else? So I think I'm just good. Should have seen something like that coming. So yeah, I don't know if I really see too much of a difference here between the other Pathfinder games and this. As far as this trailer, I wasn't paying a lot of attention to it. And then this trailer ends at like the 2-minute mark, and then you have people talking, and then eventually it starts showing off like completely different games. So it's just a lot of talking after that first couple of minutes. I think Pathfinder is pretty popular, but it's certainly not something I've put my attention to enough of. I think part of the problem is that you are, in most of the Pathfinders, paying a monthly fee, and then there's just like seasonality to it, and that your characters are getting reset and you're doing the same thing in the same areas over and over again. Unless I'm thinking of a completely different game, and I've just confused that with Pathfinder. On the other hand, Pathfinder probably needs to get things out and get as many eyes on its products as quickly as possible before Diablo 4 comes out, because Diablo 4 still has the name recognition, even though there are several games that arguably should be more popular and more played than the Diablo series. Diablo has the themes and the name recognition that people grew up with, and so people tend to not particularly stick with the Diablo series as much as they play it, then they forget about it for a few years, then they come back and play the next one. Our last Gematsu article for today is a MetaQuest gaming showcase set for June 1st, which I guess it will be slightly interesting. If they have a gaming showcase and they announce a whole bunch of MetaQuest games that are new. Otherwise, it's probably going to just be an also-ran experience where there's just a bunch of announcements for VR games that are already available for other VR headsets, like the PlayStation VR 2, also coming to the MetaQuest. Noticeably, Steam and Valve has pretty much given up on VR, or they just don't have anything new to announce around it, and that's probably a smart move for them to get away from the VR headset stuff and just focus on the Steam Deck, there would have been a heavy temptation, certainly, to put the VR headset that they were pushing into the Steam Deck in some way. And as far as I know, I don't think anybody has succeeded to in any way plug in a VR headset into a Steam Deck and get it to work. Which, yeah, it's probably very power hungry even if it did work, so it would only last maybe 20-40 minutes, and it really would just work as a screen. There are cheaper augmented reality glasses you could use instead. Plus, then the Steam Deck controllers would just not really work very well as VR controllers compared to other options. Alright, well then let's quickly do a fall list cleanup. We have a horror game here from September 2022 called Endless Nightmares. Let's look at the reviews. It's not particularly relevant. None of the reviews seem to be in English. This definitely feels like it's a PT clone. And yeah, I think at this point we could say no. There's basically been no games like this that I've ever covered on my channel or really have any interest to play. I'll play horror games certainly, but the horror games I tend to play are ones where you can fight back or you can actually have a decent story around it and that they're just longer running experiences. Whereas a lot of these hide and seek type horror games look very asset flippy and really just don't feel like there's a whole experience. Resident Evil 7, for instance, is much better of a game to focus on playing than say a random horror game. This Endless Nesla looks like an infinite runner of no real interest, so I'm going to take that off the fall list. It came out in January, and I probably was being too positive to even put it on the fall list. We ended up back. Where am I? Yeah, I bet what happened there is that's another game that was removed from my removed from Steam. And whenever you have something on your wish list that's removed from Steam, it tends to it takes you back to the front page. Which, yeah, we can see a Devolver Digital sale going on right now. We can get a general idea of what's on sale. I didn't know EVE Online was even on Steam. Am I thinking of something else? But then you have Path of Exile Crucible here, which just came out in 2013. And yep, it's basically the same game. It's very positive. This one's free to play. Yeah, one of the things that, if I'm recalling correctly, is a little bit weirder around the Path of the Exile games is that they are kind of constantly adding new DLC or versions. So the idea of Path of Exile as a series is perhaps a hard one to figure out as far as what order should you play them all in. And the more like this is not going to be super helpful on that either. back to the fall list cleanup. We have a game called Inlander's First Encounter. I think I want to say no to this. Build your deck, glitch through enemies, translate unknown languages, and decipher mysteries of the universe. He's about to destroy all my cards, and I'm about to special summon something. Oh, he destroyed all the spell cards. Interesting. I played well without knowing I was playing well. Okay. If I was to activate this, or to activate this, is this a spellcaster? No. Is this a fairy? Let's start by just attacking. Start with something weak. Let's activate this. I really want to just get one more victory so then I can stop playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And be happy with where I'm at. It really would be crazy to stop playing Yu-Gi-Oh! At this point. Yeah, I think that has it. See if we want to special summon anything. Just in the turn. Yeah, I think I'm going to say no to this Inlander's First Encounter. This is a prologue anyways for another game called just Inlanders, which is not even out yet. So, a very positive prologue. Doesn't mean anything really to me and shouldn't have been on here. Encore Classic Casino Games. This is a game that I would like just out of nostalgia, but you can see it's mixed reviewed on that. So I'm going to make a special exception here. But I'm literally just saying I would want to own this game so I could point out, hey, this is what classic casino games looked like back in the day. And this very possibly is before you would have had Texas Hold'em as its own thing. Nope, actually they do have Texas Hold'em on the table. Encore, as a company, I don't think it exists anymore, but they made several different variants of these kinds of games. Although that seems to be the only one listed. Yeah, here you have Encore Classic card games that weren't casino games, and it's fairly asset flippy. Same characters, just programmed slightly different visually, as far as, and of course the real work would be around programming something like War here to actually play versus a match 2 thing here, or these other games. This may have poker in it again. Arguably, though, you still are in a weird position where if you had a Steam Deck and you wanted to play a classic card game, this is as good as of an option as anything else I could recommend. Like, the Tabletop Simulator is the only other game that I would heavily recommend as far as playing card games. This is weird. Constant glitches and freezing. It's probably being emulated for like a Windows 95 operating system behind it. Encoded War. I think I'll say yes to this. It doesn't have 30 reviews, but I don't think I really need to wait that long. It's 25 reviews, 80% positive. Morse coding mini game. Morse coding. Learn Morse coding. Alright, we may have a problem now. If I flip all of these and nothing takes control of this, these potentially are not going to. Not going to be something I can do anything with. Oh, I guess if I attack them face down defense mode, though, they might die anyways. We have a game here called Enclosure 3D, which looks like a old CGA point-and-click adventure, Sierra type game. This was inspired by Sierra games, and at this point, being inspired by Sierra games is not enough to justify a game, me looking at a game. It's not relevant to either. It does have only 17 reviews. If it was inspired more by a point-and-click talky LucasArts game, I might consider that a little bit more. Okay. See if that triggers anything as far as a trap. Let's see, what do we need? Earth, 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 fire, earth. So definitely go water. So this fire should increase everybody. So this should all theoretically work. We'll just see what happens here. Face up her attack defense position. Face down defense to its position. Oh man, he may have like an ultimate defense here. He may not have anything I could do. Yeah, a really good LucasArts next generation point-and-click adventure game I might consider something inspired by that But honestly, I don't know anybody that really wants to play a very pixely Sierra game that is a brand new game that's just inspired by that. Let's see. Enchanted in the Moonlight. Is this an adult game? It's rated M for mature. Interesting. It's claiming that by the ESRB. So you have Fox, Anime Fox Boys, and a adult game. I think the reason why this is on the fall list in particular is just to see if there was any relevance around this. That being said, it hasn't been out that long. And if anything, this might be a good touchstone to show that there isn't actually that much either relevance, because there aren't enough people that actually would want to play a game like this. There aren't enough probably either gay guys or straight girls that would want to play this kind of game. Or there's just not enough eyes on Steam looking for this type of game, which that is very possibly the case, is that there probably is an audience for this type of game, but it's just not on Steam. And then there's a whole nother one that has 2 user reviews. And so they're both positive. So I'm going to leave these on the fall list until probably somewhere around March 2024, just to see what kind of relevancy an adult game for people of those tastes might have on Steam. Managed to destroy a lot of my cards, and I think I managed to pick the wrong card. And as soon as this guy ends his turn, he's just flipping everything face down. I guess that's the idea of these sub-terror cards. Okay. Try this, summon this. And see, he's got something he can activate each turn, so he's really dragging out this game. And then our last fall list cleanup game we have here is called Empire Dukes of the Far Frontier, which I could probably say no to this. It's not relevant. It's from 2022. A Neo-Victorian Wild West. It's just not quite enough detail in the visuals, and you're really zoomed away from any of the characters. Like, I couldn't even really tell you which character you're supposed to be controlling right now. Is it this robot? Maybe, but maybe that robot. It's just really hard to do. It looks like a very zoomed out and arguably less polished version of Fallout 1 or Fallout 2. I guess we'll try something here. We've got 2 of these, so maybe that means something. Okay. Special summon this, so it's pointing to this. Let me draw a card. 1 earth monster in your graveyard, special summon it to a zone you're pointing to. Okay. See, this is my card, because he's got the different card backs there. Well, I'll be darned, but I may have figured out a way to win here. If he can't counter this Harpy's Feather Duster, then that may have destroyed half of his strategy. It still seems like he has something he thinks the game will let him activate. If anything, that's going to speed up the process though. This, I'm hoping, destroys this. Right. Which then creates a slight problem there, but I think starts to solve the problem. As long as he can't play his next couple of cards. So we're into the GameDeveloper.com articles. We're actually going fairly quickly. Hoyo versus Honkai Star Rail has 20 million downloads on launch day. This is a pretty hyped continuation from, or next game from the creators of Genshin Impact, which Hoyoverse used to be called miHoYo. Genshin Impact reported 17 million downloads in the first day, so 3 more million in one day. That being said, they didn't catch my attention that I would want to start playing this game immediately or ever. And I will say they have kind of failed to tell me or put out enough press releases to tell me what this game even is, that I would have paid any attention to it. For as a game that potentially is going to be as big as it seems like it might be, I would have thought I would have seen more trailers, teasers, advertisements, and honestly I saw like one YouTuber talk about it, and that's about it. I don't know if I even saw any Gamatsu articles. Astragon is acquiring a long-running German studio, Independent Arts. Team 17 is a subsidiary of Astragon Entertainment. It's bringing one of Germany's oldest game studios under its wings. So, kind of a merger of German game companies, which maybe that means we'll see bigger and better games from Germany, or maybe it means we'll just see less competition and less games from Germany in general. Still trying to do all my data quests for Destiny Child. I should be covering the news though and not doing this. It is taking a long time to get to that last point here, where we get that one last victory. And I kind of don't want to go into the YouTube, looking at the new games on YouTube if I'm still playing Yu-Gi-Oh! I guess I've inherently created this situation where, say yes to that. What do we have already? Let's take this one. That was an extra one. Yeah, I've created a situation now where there is a really good reason to not not stop playing Yu-Gi-Oh as early as I may have done before, which is kind of not what I wanted to have happen. But yeah, in this one weird situation, it's been helpful, but in future situations it is definitely going to be more of a hassle. Okay, we have no choice. Then we have an earth, we have a wind, and we have a fire. I'm gonna go with fire. And then we'll go with earth. Go ahead and flip this. So I think we have like all of the different things. We may have gotten it there. Which means I very possibly could have won earlier had I just brought a wind character to the field. Yeah, particularly because when I'm looking at new games that came out on Steam, I have the blur enabled. There's really no way to play Yu-Gi-Oh and do that at the same time. You could do that, but it wouldn't particularly help. But do that this way. Probably should have been face up defense position there, not face up attack position, but whatever. I guess it really wouldn't hurt if I was looking at games and I was just switching back to Yu-Gi-Oh while I was talking about an adult game. One thing that it did occur to me is I do have another plugin that will block whatever keywords I would want. So theoretically I could have it remove or blur out cuss words on adult things. Cuss words in this case being not really insulting cuss words as much as just sexually explicit words, genitalia type words. I don't know if that's really necessary though. I'm already blurring out the entirety of the page, so that that would seem like you were just redundantly blurring things for no real reason. Man, this game is still going on. We were doing pretty well to avoid these long drawn-out battles, but this really is turning into quite the challenge. He's trying to win, I'm trying to win, we're both desperately trying to win. We have very little time left. It might have been more efficient to have just surrendered and moved on to the next person who maybe wouldn't have cared as much. Yeah, I think I'm gonna lose here, and I don't know if I have anything I can do to avoid losing. just get rid of that, I guess. Wow. I won because the other guy ran out of time. Which that very possibly may be the last time ever in my life in which that happens. I have lost so many times by taking too long, but I've never seen anybody else do that. Alright, well, that got me to this big jump where we got 300 gems, and it's not worth it to spend any more time to try and get legacy packs. We have a massive amount of legacy packs. What would be very annoying here is if somehow we didn't have all the missions done, like winning 10 in the festival, obviously. Like, we had done that. We got lucky to be able to get that many victories. But if somehow there were daily missions that weren't here, I'm a little surprised they didn't give me a win in solo mode. Play solo mode daily quest. And then log in. So more gems for doing those daily quests. And then there really is nothing else to do other than watch a duel live. As far as the legacy packs go, we have 130 of them, so it's should have opened 10 packs to begin with. Ooh, an ultra rare guarantee on the legacy pack. Let's open those normally then. They may have changed the odds here somewhat, in that now you can get more or have a higher chance of getting ultra rares or super rares or foil versions, shiny versions of the cards, legacy cards in particular. It would make a lot of sense that for some of these legacy normal monsters that have basically no value at all because they're just not playable, it would make a lot of sense to by default give everybody foil versions of those cards. That would be a nice way to potentially reprint old cards, is to give them some extra value visually while not admitting that they have no value otherwise. Card destruction, interesting. In actual playableness. There we got an upgrade to ultra rare from super rare. And that's yet another ultra rare, but not a new card, so I already had him. And inherently that is what I think is gonna be the issues. I have more than enough cards at this point, I just don't know how to play them. There's over 10,000 cards in this game, and maybe a few hundred are actually playable, and you'd have to still understand which few hundred are playable. So if we were to do that again, since we have so much, here we have 2 super rares. We'll skip. One of those did get upgraded to an ultra rare. Alright, so that does seem like we're having slightly better odds. And I am at 8,000 gems right now, so it does make a lot of sense that perhaps on Wednesday, if I remember, we'll open 30 packs of Blessings of Nature probably, and then we'll unlock some secret packs and maybe open some of those and get us down to maybe 10 or 20,000, which hopefully that doesn't turn into a big mistake in which they start releasing something else to buy. Alright, well, that should be it for Yu-Gi-Oh! Now. So let's turn on the blur. There we go. Yeah, one of the things that surprised me, I was in a Best Buy a few days ago, is that the Best Buy had like Rode, RODE microphones, podcasting type equipment, but they didn't have any of the newer Rode equipment, which probably makes sense. I don't know if it's really available yet as far as smaller soundboards, but they didn't even have the Rodecaster Pro 1. So it was just weird to see any of that. Best Buy, definitely the one I was in, seemed like a lot of people went and would rent video equipment, audio equipment for a day and then return it the next day after for like one wedding event or something. Which if you're going to do that, you'd probably rent it for a week, not just one day, to learn how to use it and then return it after the fact. So we have 3 more GameDeveloper.com articles before we get to the new video games on Steam. Ryo Nagamatsu, the longtime Nintendo composer, has departed after 17 years. Before he left Nintendo to go freelance, Nagamatsu worked on music for various Nintendo games such as Super Smash Bros. Ultimate and Splatoon 3, which, yeah. If anything, this is just more of an example that Nintendo is really not a company that makes video games as much as they license the ideas to other people. Metroid Dread's a great example of that, in that almost certainly should have been an in-house game instead of having Mercury Stream actually make the game, and then making Mercury Stream claim that they did it in collaboration with Nintendo, where I imagine Nintendo did very little coding on it. This is also, on another aspect, I think, an example of Japanese people not sticking to that idea of staying with a company for their entire life, and instead going freelance, particularly artistic Japanese people and successful Japanese people. The average Japanese person, the average salary man, probably still working at a job for their entire life and hating it and being miserable, but even that may change, certainly. There's a lot of argument that there should be earlier retirement ages and pensions, and that there would be a lot of demand for that in Japan, since I think it's mostly the old people that vote in Japan. So yeah, I could see more of that happening, and more of their unions actually pushing for less work hours and less demanding jobs. And maybe still, unions generally do still push you to stay at the same position for your entire life, and unions tend to exist when you are very unlikely to ever get promoted, and so you will just be in that same associate level job, and maybe you'll go from level 1 to level 2 to level 3, but you have no chance of ever really being in a management position or moving to a different department. So we might see more of a push that direction too. Moving on, New World and Lost Ark forums have been killed as Amazon has pivoted to Discord. 2 more games whose forums are ended in favor of relocating to Discord, which I probably should do a little bit more research on what the benefits of Discord really are compared to just having a website forum. I imagine it is just a lot more difficult to spam a Discord forum than it is to post spam on a website. But maybe there's some other features. The real question there is how easy is it to archive or go back and search a Discord versus searching a forum for whatever value there might actually be around that. I think a lot of places don't need forums, particularly video games, in the first place. You put something on Steam, inherently has its own forum built into the Valve website, and so that's as good of a place as any to just have your forum is on Steam, and then just not have one on your main website, which increasingly we're seeing main websites become less and less as far as websites, and less necessary to exist in general. You wouldn't go to, like, second dinner to look at Marvel Snap, you would go to Steam and you would Google Marvel Snap, and it would either take you to a link on Steam or an Android Google Play Store, depending on what device you're Googling it on. And then our final GameDeveloper.com article for today says Dauntless developer Phoenix Labs has laid off 30 employees. They're reducing its project load months after the founders bought the studio to regain ownership from the parent company, Garenia. Which, yeah, sounds like rough times at Phoenix Labs. Alright, so new games on Steam. We have a shoot 'em up called Address 1, where it's Japanese only. And so we're not making YouTube shorts around that. Speaking of not making YouTube shorts, I did not make any YouTube shorts over the weekend, which was also a thing. We immediately get into our first adult game, Snow Queen, a fairy tale for a big boy. 3D CGI characters. That being said, seems like it's just 2 characters, and it seems fairly asset flippy. In a weird way, one of the characters looks like a Snow Queen, but then in a fantasy world, but then the other guy, the one screenshot, seems to have them look like they are in modern times. So it's almost, I wouldn't be surprised if this is somebody's telling a fairy tale to the other person. One thing I think that's worth pointing out is, even though a lot of this background art looks asset flippy and not very pretty, there are some intriguing poses in the adult content going here. Somebody put a lot of effort to pose a body that would look something like a human body, where they're just like lying on each other, wrapping around each other. It feels very boudoir-esque and artistic, whereas so often in these games the poses are very standard doggy style missionary type stuff. It's just like nothing special, nothing you would really say elevates that. And taking the wireframe 3D models and making different poses is a sign of some effort, or in at least that focus. Snow Queen, a fairy tale for a big boy, is $3.99. Its top languages are English, French, Italian, German, and Spanish. Yeah. Doesn't seem to really go in any other direction than one guy, one girl, though. If that's a problem, and it doesn't seem to really try to hit on any real fetish other than maybe a little bit of lacy lingerie. Let's see, Floradomnia. I'll give this a chance, even though 4X games are not particularly my biggest interest. What had really concerned me with Twitter being broken, and this may just be the beginning of the end of Twitter. Good thing my macro does not rely on Twitter in any way anymore. But what had concerned me was that my internet was broken yet again, and that I was just going to spend hours and hours trying to get it to work, or that these apparently this is an adult game too. My concern was going to be that this was, none of the web pages would have opened, and then I don't know what I would have done for a stream. It would have been a very, very short stream if I couldn't talk about video game news or anything. We would have actually, well, in this case it actually wouldn't have been that short. It would have just been slightly shorter, because we would have just played Yu-Gi-Oh! And I guess if Yu-Gi-Oh! Didn't work, then I would not even bother to stream. There's no point in even starting the stream to say, hey, today's stream is canceled. In the future, if I had a lot more subscribers and people were enthusiastic about that, I might say yes, I might do something like that, but at the moment, not that many people are expecting me to stream. So here you have this guy that kind of looks like Goku if you made him a white guy and less of an Asian guy. And this is some kind of visual novel dating sim gay guy on guy to the animation. It definitely feels more Western in its animation style. It's not showing any adult content, so I question how much really is here. It may be a lot of text and a lot of implied stuff and no real nudity. And we may be increasingly seeing games that are lewd or have implied sensuality, sexuality, and then don't have any nudity in them. In this case, it says there is nudity. It's English only. It's $19.99 though, and that seems like that is a big price for a Chapter 2 episodic game. It's English only. And yeah, I would just say, while the animation style doesn't look terrible, it does come off as I almost want to say Archie Comics style animation. It's just not what I think most people would be looking for. Although for the gay audience, I don't know if that's really what you're looking for. I often question though when you have like a fighting tournament idea and violence intertwined with sexuality. That seems like a very you're getting into the rough sex fetish a little bit there, and yeah, that'll be, some people will be into that, some people won't, and that's kind of a fetish that's often difficult to recognize. Gay guys in particular, both being of equal muscle mass and strength, a lot of times can throw each other around and be a lot rougher than a female male relationship where one of them is considerably stronger, or tends to be considerably stronger, and the other tends to be considerably weaker. Cube Run doesn't look like anything. Gods of Defense looks like it's a tower defense game. To the Dogfight looks like a garbage asset flip game. Simply City. Now the one thing that I guess is different here is even though we had very little game news, it still seems like we had a decent number of games still coming out. This is a text-based game. I guess this is probably maybe a no, it's not a sequel to something. Ticket to Europe. Proses and Codes. I want to check out this other game, Proses and Codes, first. And then we'll come back. This is already on my wish list. No, never mind. Alright. So, put this on the follow list. Text-based RPG about a journalist looking for a big break by uncovering the plights of refugees traveling from Africa to Europe. It's a story inspired by true events. This could be a very brutal story too. You can see this lady's arm has been chopped off. Yeah, this definitely feels like this could be a very rough story. Any refugee story could be very rough. Green New Deal simulator. Nobody even uses that phrase at this point. Green New Deal. Watchers of the Universe, I'm out of here. I'll give this a chance. Now, I could make an argument that maybe we're seeing slightly less adult games lately in the past 2-3 weeks, but you really are getting to the point where the difference is like 3 instead of 2 or 2 instead of 3, and that could just be natural variance. And frankly, slightly less garbage adult games so that more of the cream could rise to the crop might be a good idea. Although, in the case of the adult section on Steam, you'd have to have people actually see the adult section on Steam, and very few people are. I'm going to just say no to this. Follow me. I'll give that a chance. What is this supposed to be? I'm not even getting the idea of what this is. It's probably a top-down twin-stick shooter. I'm just gonna have to assume it's that. And perhaps I'm mentally exhausted here, but I'm not even willing to give that game a chance. The Dead Await prologue. I'm surprised we don't see more games that have more of a tile-based, like, tabletop appearance to it, but I guess inherently the thing there's just no real reason to have tile-based floor plans, even if you technically are making a game with tile-based things. I have wonder if this game is somehow related to the Grateful Dead band, because it does seem like there's a lot of people that look like they would be in a rock band, but I guess it's more about a zombie invasion. Maybe it's a little bit both. But yeah, there's a lot of t-shirts going on these characters. But it's prologue, so I'm just going to say no to prologues. That will help reduce the number of YouTube shorts by far. I'm going to give this a chance, even though it's a little wonky looking. Gonna give this a chance. Wikipedia just said that they were not going to implement an age verification system, which I think in the US there are probably some states that have straight up said they're going to try and filter the internet and force websites to have age gate systems, and age gate systems that will straight up block kids from being online on those websites or anywhere after a certain time, and then it will just be sometimes block them directly. Almost certainly that's because of like the anti-trans measures being taken, that they want Wikipedia to block any definitions of transgenderism from kids, or just block it in general. They're eliminating the freedom of the press effectively. This is a Japanese only visual novel. There was definitely a lot of times in the past where Japanese games would have this very light white background theme, and I haven't seen it in a while though. It's not particularly the easiest to read. So, as far as how that relates to video games, I understand how Valve has an age gate system, but the fact that it has two age gate systems, in that you have to go into your user profile and tell it to show you the adult section listed games, and when you go to a specific game that is rated by the ESRB, you have to verify your age every time, or nearly every time, is kind of ridiculous. And the fact that they're following the ESRB's rules and regulations is kind of crazy. dungeon crawler game where you're in hell with a tennis ball and a racket to make a game called Hell of a Racket. It's a good pun. It's a good pun to put a spin on a kind of generic idea and concept. It's a free-to-play game, single player. It probably isn't too much. I wouldn't be surprised if you stand in one spot and swing always and you don't actually run around and dungeon crawl. I kind of wish I could play the video here. See how that plays in motion. Let's see, we have a game called World Turtles, which, yeah, that takes that old fantasy thought of a world being on the back of a turtle to a whole nother direction. Vagabond looks like an RPG maker game of no interest. Ethereal Echoes of Yore is already mixed, so I'm gonna say no to it. Q Remastered, is this some game around the QAnon and Q conspiracy, which I haven't heard anybody say anything around that in a while either. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on the fall list, but I'm going to then check it to see if there was an old version, and then I'm not going to make a YouTube short around it because visually it doesn't look that interesting. Honestly, I probably don't even need to put it on the fall list. But if it somehow was overwhelmingly positive, that is where I would want to potentially find something else. Now, The Last of Us is already on Steam, so it makes an interesting question whether a knockoff of The Last of Us should get a YouTube short, because this is obviously taking some of the visuals of The Last of Us, playing a very different type of game, and then you hack and slash at the zombies and you're not stealthing the zombies so much. It doesn't feel asset flippy enough to just dismiss completely. It feels like there might actually be something here, even though almost certainly there isn't. So I'm going to give it a follow. I'll make a YouTube short on it. I'll see if anybody comments and goes, oh yay, here's the Last of Us clone, or not. Oh yay being sarcastic in that case. Or that is one of the problems with YouTube shorts, is that there's just not a high chance, I think, in general, of getting any engagement, and I'd have a hard time trying to think of a way to encourage engagement more around YouTube shorts. The only thing I could think of is potentially trying to have YouTube shorts link back to my pre-recorded footage, which I don't have a great way of doing that. I could probably put a screen at the very end to say, hey, check out my other videos and things like that, but that's pretty much it. Paws of Coal. Yeah, there might be something to this cartoony, almost Disney-esque game. I'm surprised there aren't more games that straight up try to ape the visual aesthetics of old Disney cartoons. Like, I could see they have tried to make some games that are Disney-esque by modern Disney animation, CGI standards, but no Bambi, Dumbo, Snow White type animations from previous decades. give that a chance. May have only like 3 or 4 more games. And again, yeah, it does seem like we are going to have only 2 adult games over the weekend. Perhaps a slightly slow weekend for some reason. I am not sure why though. I don't get it. Hmm. Start to just continuously scroll through these really quickly because there's not a lot there. Sorry, I'm going quiet too. Like, I've kind of run out of steam too. Yeah. Okay, well, somehow that all kind of balanced out to 3 hours and 11 for the stream. And we got everything that I wanted to get done, or, well, that was reasonable to expect to get done as far as Yu-Gi-Oh! And so everything kind of worked out. Only real problem now was that I started too late, which is just me waking up. And now I need to finish Metroid Dread and then get back to playing Lego DC Supervillains before I take too long of a break in between those. That's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching.